Pakistan's Foreign Minister and United Nations General Assembly's President-elect Volkan Bozkir have discussed the worsening situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. In a joint statement, Shah Mahmood Qureshi said he briefed Bozkir about the Indian atrocities and illegal actions taken in August last year. Earlier in a meeting with Bozkir, Prime Minister Imran Khan highlighted India's illegal attempts to change the demographic structure of the occupied territory. Five people have been killed and 14 others wounded in an IED blast in the CHAMAN area of Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province. Police say the bomb was planted in a motorcycle parked on the CHAMAN Mall Road. Prime Minister Imran Khan has condemned the attack and expressed grief over the loss of precious lives. Israel says its warplanes have targeted multiple locations on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Ministry said it struck Hamas observation posts in retaliation to explosive balloon attacks. China says it will impose sanctions on 11 U.S. officials, including Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. The Foreign Ministry announced the curbs after Washington imposed sanctions on 11 Hong Kong and Chinese officials earlier. India has reported the highest daily COVID-19 deaths in the world, with over 1,000 new fatalities and the tally crossing 44,000. In Brazil, 572 more people died overnight, bringing the toll to over 101,000, with over 3 million cases. Meanwhile, in the United States, COVID-19 infections have crossed 5 million, while the death toll has reached nearly 163,000. In Pakistan, 15 more people have lost their lives during the last 24 hours, with more than 17,000 active cases. Globally, the COVID-19 has taken over 731,000 lives, while infecting over 19.8 million. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now for the news in detail. We start from Pakistan, whose Foreign Minister and United Nations General Assembly's President-elect Volkan Bozkir have discussed the worsening situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir. In a joint statement, Shah Mahmood Qureshi said he briefed Bozkir about the Indian atrocities and illegal actions taken in August last year. Qureshi said both sides had a good discussion on upcoming 75th session of the UN General Assembly. He said they had wide-ranging discussions on several issues. They also discussed ways and means to strengthen multilateralism. Earlier in a meeting with Bozkir, Prime Minister Imran Khan highlighted India's illegal attempts to change the demographic structure of the occupied territory. Now, 5 people have been killed and 14 others wounded in an IED blast in the CHAMAN area of Pakistan's southwestern Balochistan province. Police say the bomb was planted in a motorcycle parked on the CHAMAN Mall Road. Assistant Commissioner of the city said the wounded have been shifted to civil hospital. Security forces have cordoned off the area. Prime Minister Imran Khan has condemned the attack and expressed grief over the loss of precious lives. Moving on, China says it will impose sanctions on 11 U.S. officials, including Senator Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. The Foreign Ministry announced the curbs after Washington imposed sanctions on 11 Hong Kong and Chinese officials earlier. The move by Beijing came after Hong Kong police detained media tycoon Jimmy Lai for allegedly breaching the security law. Earlier, Washington announced its toughest ever sanctions on Chinese officials, alleging they had undermined Hong Kong's autonomy by introducing new security law. Under these sanctions, Washington froze U.S. assets of Chinese officials. Now, Israel says its warplanes have targeted multiple locations on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Ministry says it struck Hamas observation posts in retaliation to explosive balloon attacks. The Hamas-linked media outlet has confirmed the claim, saying the posts were located near Beit Hanun. No casualties have been reported so far. This is the second time this week that there has been an escalation between Israel and Gaza. On Friday, Israel claimed to hit Hamas underground infrastructure in an airstrike. India has reported the highest daily COVID-19 deaths in the world, with over 1,000 new fatalities and the tally crossing 44,000. In Brazil, 572 more people died overnight, bringing the toll to over 101,000 with over 3 million cases. Globally, more than 731,000 people have lost their lives to the virus, with over 19.8 million infections. This report has more details.
The new coronavirus continues to wreak havoc in the US and Latin America, where tens of thousands are getting infected every single day. In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro has extended the lockdown by 30 days, keeping travel restrictions to prevent a surge in imported cases. But Brazil and Mexico have ruled out reimposing restrictions despite a surge in infections.
Now that we in Brazil have arrived at 100,000 COVID-19 deaths and nearly 3 million infections, we want to have the hope and trust that each one of us is important, and also that each one of us has responsibility to act and to be aware in our country and in the world.
In Washington, Democrats and Republicans have failed for the fifth time to present a new economic relief package to salvage the country's growing financial worries.
Well, what we're doing is we reimburse through the general fund, not through Social Security. This will have no impact on Social Security. We're going to, through the general fund, reimburse. This will have zero impact on Social Security.
In Europe and Australia, the second wave has dampened hopes of a revival of the economy. In Asia, mainland China continues to report cases due to local transmission from clusters. Over in the Korean Peninsula, floods coupled with COVID-19 have magnified the issue as the government struggles to battle the challenge.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the COVID-19 death rate has dropped as 15 people have died in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says 539 cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed 284,000. The ministry said over 260,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. It says there are over 17,000 active cases in the country, among which 776 remain critical. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 123,000 infections, while Punjab has reported more than 94,000 cases. According to a ministry statement, Pakistan has decided to reopen its restaurants, cinemas, theatres and parks from today. Now, the United States has welcomed the Afghan lawyer Jirga's declaration and President Ashraf Ghani's decree to release the remaining 400 Taliban prisoners. U.S. Special Envoy for Afghanistan Zalmay Khalilzad said the move will help end 40 years of war and contribute to regional peace and security. The Taliban say they are ready to start the intra-Afghan talks within 10 days after the release of prisoners as agreed by the Grand Council. In a statement, Taliban spokesman Suhail Shaheen hailed the Grand Council's decision under the Doha peace deal. Shaheen said the first round of talks will be held by former chief negotiator Abbas Taniksai. In a tweet, he said a ceasefire will be an important part of the negotiations. Moving on now, the United States has slammed Yemen's Houthi rebels for reneging on a deal to allow UN teams to board a rusting oil storage vessel stranded in the Red Sea. In a statement, the White House National Security Council said the rebels are courting environmental and humanitarian disaster by obstructing and delaying. It said the Houthis have failed to follow through on their agreement to allow a UN team onto the Safer. The council urged the rebels to allow access to the UN team for the good of Yemen and its people. The FSO Safer has been moored 7 kilometers off the coast of Yemen since 1988. It fell into Houthi hands in March 2015 when they took control of the coast around the port city of Hodeidah. Now, 6 French nationals and 2 locals have been killed in an attack by unknown gunmen in a wildlife park in Niger's Kora region. The 2 locals killed are the French tourist guide and driver, while 6 were volunteers to French aid agency AQUATIC. Tilaberi region governor said the armed men arrived on motorcycles and opened fire on the 8 workers. It said they are analyzing the situation. While the French Foreign Ministry said checks are underway into the reports of the attack. French President Emmanuel Macron has condemned the killing as a cowardly act and vowed to fight militants in the Sahel region. The Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has won a 6th term as president. Election Commission says the sitting president bagged over 80% of the total votes. Opposition politician Svetlana Tikhanovskaya has refused to recognize official results. Talking to media, Tikhanovskaya said she considers herself the election winner, not Lukashenko. Meanwhile, a protester was killed and dozens others wounded in mass protests erupted in the capital Minsk over alleged rigging polls. Police said they have detained 3,000 people from opposition rallies and protests. Earlier in clashes, police fired stun grenades and water cannon on the protesters. Now in Spain, protesters are calling for an end to the monarchy as former King Juan Carlos led the country amid a corruption probe. The demonstrators say they won't rest until they rid the country of corruption, starting with the crown. About 100 Republicans demonstrated in Valencia, while more protests are planned for the island of Mallorca, where King Felipe VI is due to visit this week. Former King Juan Carlos abdicated in 2014 in favor of his son Felipe. Carlos abruptly announced his decision to leave the country, but there has been no official confirmation of where he went. Now over to Lebanon, where the Justice Minister Mary-Claude Najm has presented her resignation, citing the catastrophic explosion at the port of Beirut. This comes as anti-government protests continued in Beirut after the explosion killed 158 people. Thousands of demonstrators gathered near the Parliament Square demanding the entire government's resignation. Police fired tear gas to disperse protesters who hurled rocks at security forces and blocked a major road near the Parliament. Yesterday, 1 policeman was killed and over 170 people were wounded during the clashes. The Information and Environment Ministers, as well as several lawmakers, also quit yesterday. Meanwhile, Turkey says it has killed 3 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in airstrikes during a counter-terrorist operation in northern Iraq. The National Defense Ministry said military operations backed by air power were carried out in the Awasin-Basyan region. The ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapons caches and shelters used by the terrorists. It said over 400 Kurdish militants have been killed in northern Iraq over the past 5 months. State media said PKK militants often use northern Iraq to plan cross-border terrorist attacks in Turkey. Ankara holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in a 30-year terror campaign. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. 5 nations have called on the Hong Kong government to hold legislative council elections as soon as possible. In a joint statement with Australia, Canada, New Zealand and the United States, Britain's Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said the 5 countries are concerned about the disqualification of candidates in Hong Kong. He called on the Hong Kong government to reinstate the eligibility of disqualified candidates. The joint statement also expressed concern at Beijing's imposition of the new national security law. Earlier last month, Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam postponed legislative elections by a year due to a resurgence in COVID-19 cases. But pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong say the pandemic was being used as an excuse to delay the election. In Pakistan, the death toll in rain-related incidents has risen to 58. 3 days of heavy monsoon rains have triggered flash floods across the country. Pakistan's National Disaster Management Authority said 19 people lost their lives in the northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. It said 12 died in southern Sindh province, 8 in Punjab and Balochistan province each, while 10 in the country's northern Gilgit-Baltistan region. Rain also damaged about 100 homes and caused a breach in a flooded main canal, inundating villages in Sindh province. The military said it has rescued more than 100 people from Dadu district in Sindh. Now at least 7 people have been killed after torrential rain and thunderstorms caused flash flooding on the Greek island of Evia. Officials said most of the victims, including a baby, were found in or near their homes in Evia. Fire brigade officials said rescuers are still searching for one missing person. The fire department received hundreds of calls to pump water from homes and vehicles. Dozens were evacuated and 43 people were rescued by helicopter as roads flooded an area where a river had burst its banks. Experts have warned that the climate change is expected to intensify weather events in Greece, where summers are usually dry. Now, large plumes of smoke are wafting through jungle trees as the Amazon is once again under threat from forest fires. The Brazilian government data shows fires in the world's largest rainforest have surged in August. Brazilian Space Research Agency INPE recorded 5,860 fires in the Amazon in the first week of August. This is a 7% increase from the same period of last year. The trend suggests this month may be on par with a year ago, the worst August in 9 years. Environmental advocates blame right-wing President Jair Bolsonaro for emboldening illegal loggers, miners and land speculators to destroy the forest. Bolsonaro says more mining and farming are needed in the region to lift people out of poverty. Now, 400 drones have performed a light show in China's central Wuhan city to pay respect to the residents. The drones took off from Wuhan's Central Cultural District and gave a performance at height of almost 250 meters. Equipped with colorful LEDs, the drones display the images of Wuhan's landmark architectures, including the Yellow Crane Tower and the Yangtze River Bridge. The event was organized to pay respect to Wuhan's people who fought bravely against the COVID-19 pandemic and the flood disaster. The residents said they were deeply moved by the gesture and words displayed by the drones. They said during the outbreak, Wuhan learned that all people share a common future. A Japanese consortium has opened an aquarium in Taiwan, their first outside Japan. This comes even as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to rage across much of the world. More details in this report.
From lunch with the penguins to the translucent shimmer of jellyfish and gliding rays, all underwater life is on display at a new aquarium in Taiwan. The aquarium in Taiwan region boasts a collection of 30,000 fish drawn from more than 300 species in 13 exhibition areas.
We plan to open at the end of 2019. As we all know, at the end of 2019, the pandemic broke out. Because of the pandemic, we had talked to multiple sides, including the government and public health authorities, and we decided to postpone the opening.
Visitors are given temperature checks on arrival as part of preventive measures due to COVID-19.
Actually, when we entered, we had masks on and they took our body temperatures, so I'm not that worried.
The complex is expected to draw 1.6 million visitors in the first year and earn annual revenue of about $30 million.
In Turkey, the Navy has issued an advisory for its ship Oryx Reis to begin oil exploration in the eastern Mediterranean during the next 2 weeks. The step is likely to revive tensions with neighboring Greece, which also claims the oil-rich waters. Earlier, President Tayyip Erdogan said Greece has not kept its promises by signing a pact with Egypt over drilling rights in the eastern Mediterranean. Tensions escalated last month when Turkey issued a similar advisory but halted operations after mediation attempts by Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. Greece has not commented on Turkey's announcement yet. Most European stocks are trading higher, brushing off tensions between the US and China that have dampened investor sentiment in Asia. But investors are taking a rather careful approach. The pan-European Stoxx 600 has edged up. London's FTSE and Paris's CAC 40 have gained fractionally so far, but Frankfurt's DAX has dipped under the flat line marginally. Asian stocks were mostly higher after data showed Chinese factory deflation slowing in July, but gains were capped by simmering Sino-US tensions. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.